at some stage during the day, some of the protesters had black masks on and things like that. We didn't know who they were. They were fighting with some of the other protesters against us. Anyway, the police sort of ushered them into the buffer zone, which was odd. And then they did a Nazi salute on the steps of Parliament. They were nowhere near us. Our people asked the police to make them leave. They said they couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day I was called into the leadership team's office and they told me that if I didn't denounce publicly Kelly J. Keane and the other organisers as being Nazi sympathisers,
Mm-hmm.
I was asked, the first thing they asked me was, do you know any Nazis?
Well, I'll say good morning to you.
Yes, good morning. It's so lovely to meet you.
So this is my guest today is Moira Deeming. She's an Australian politician. I spoke to a fellow from the Australian Telegraph, and he sent me Moira's information. And of course, I would like to do what I can to let people speak and say what they have to say. So Moira is my guest today. She's a former member of the Parliamentary Liberal Party and is currently an independent Liberal member
Well,
of
I'm
the.
still a member of the wider Liberal Party. They only managed to
Okay.
expel me from the team of MPs at Parliament.
Uh-huh. So you've had quite a fight since last year.
Yeah,
Uh, why don't you just tell us the background of why we're speaking?
sure. Um, so the background is I'm a first-term MP in the Victorian Parliament, and in the first sort of 3 months of my of beginning, I, with the full knowledge of the leadership team and everyone around me, attended a Let Women Speak event on the steps of Parliament House. And at some stage during the day, some of the protesters had black masks on and things like that. We didn't know who they were. They were fighting with some of the other protesters against us. Anyway, the police sort of ushered them into the buffer zone, which was odd. And then they did a Nazi salute on the steps of Parliament. They were nowhere near us. Our people asked the police to make them leave. They said they couldn't do that. It was getting very violent. We were all worried, so we packed up just a little bit early and went home. But basically, only a couple of women got hurt. I was one of them, and another girl actually got knocked unconscious, but she's okay. And but other than those things, it was a successful event. We had lots of women, and there were great speeches. And then later that night, I was phoned up by one of the leaders and said, there were Nazis there today, and I said, no, there weren't, not with us. That was just all the other counter protesters. That's just part of those insane groups. They've got nothing to do with us. They were nowhere near us, and we condemned them. And he said, well, you need to put out a press release. And because I was a first-term MP, I said, but no one's taught me how to do that, and you told us we weren't allowed to put out press releases without it going through all the right channels. Can you put one out for the whole party condemning them? I've already condemned them on social media. I already condemned them when I was there. I don't know how to do a press release. And he said, well, you've got to do something. You've got to get Kelly J. Keane, who was, I don't know if your viewers
Posey
have heard
Parker.
of Posey Parker. Yeah, you've got to get her to say something. And I said, she's not going to like that. She's going to find that very irritating that she even has to talk about anything else that happened that day that has nothing to do with her, because she wants to be talking about what we are talking about as women. And he was quite demanding, and I said, look, I'll try. So I spoke to the other women in Kelly J, and I said, can we at least, she was angry, as predicted. She was like, how come everybody blames me for the behaviour of bad men? And I thought, yep, you're absolutely right. I can't believe that I've been asked to ask you this. But I said, look, could we just do something where we don't take responsibility for them, but we condemn them as part of like a overall summary of the day. So we were celebrating. She got us some champagne, and we condemned the Nazis. At that stage, we didn't know who they were, and because they had no Nazi insignia other than that, Nazi salute. It was hard to know who they were. They were sort of dancing around and skipping, and I don't know. It was just very odd. And so and why they were let near to us. And so we still didn't really know what happened that day because we hadn't seen all the footage. But we condemned them. We condemned the police for letting them in near us, and added to our already done public condemnations.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day, I was called into the leadership team's office, and they told me that if I didn't denounce publicly Kelly J. Keane and the other organisers as being Nazi sympathisers,
Mm-hmm.
I was asked. The first thing they asked me was, "Do you know any Nazis?" I was, no. And then they kept repeating the question, and I thought, okay, they're coming after me. And I said, not to my knowledge, of course not. And then they said, you went out drinking with Nazi bigots. And that's when I realised they weren't even talking about the actual Nazis on the day. They were talking about these women. And I said, that's a lie. That's not true. And they said, the fact that you've even challenged us on this shows that you can't be rehabilitated. And which was, hilariously degrading. And I said, well, I'm just never condemning anyone without evidence. Where is your evidence? I'm not calling anybody a Nazi or any kind of Nazi sympathiser without evidence. That's wrong. I'm not doing it. And you shouldn't do it. That's going to backfire. You shouldn't do that to people. And they started reading out bits and pieces. I didn't have any idea at that stage that they were reading straight off Wikipedia. And my background is actually in teaching. I'm a former English teacher. Mm. And none of my students would even dare to ever submit a piece of work that referenced Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept saying, well, I'm sorry, I've not heard any of that. And I've seen her on mainstream news programs. I've seen her speak to respectable people all around the world. And I don't think you're right. Can I have a look? Can I please have a look at that laptop? Can I have a look at those sources? And, they said, no more. It took us 10 minutes to find this. It's all over the internet. And I said, well, I'm not condemning anyone unless there's irrefutable proof. I'm not doing it. And they said, well, then we're going to expel you, or you could quit and make it easier on us all. Before that, they had said, you've got to stop advocating for fringe issues. I think you need to be an independent MP. And I said, respectfully, I disagree. I was elected as part of this party. I won my pre-selection fair and square, and then I was elected with really great results. And everybody knew my views on sex-based rights, everybody. And I did really well. And so I came to you at the beginning, John, and I said, I want to deal with this issue in a way that doesn't upset the team. Can we have a discussion about it? And he never called me back. But I said to him, can you please point out where once ever I have ever spoken about this or any other issue in a disrespectful way or a hateful way? You can't, because I never have, because I don't feel any hate and I don't feel any disrespect. I just feel that these laws are awful and they're unacceptable. That's the only thing that I feel. But anyway, they just said, no, we're moving a motion to expel you. They failed the first time because they had, again, not done their homework and found out that I was actually, in large part raised by my auntie and uncle, and my uncle was a Holocaust survivor. And then I'm part Maori. I'm the first part Maori Victorian MP in my state. And, I'm a woman and a working class female, and I was at a rally about letting women speak. And I just thought, this is going to be a disaster. It will be a disaster for me if you do this to me. And I begged them not to do this. I said, if you are going to come after me, can you please do it without smearing me and my family as Nazi sympathisers? Can you please not do that? That will harm my children. Anyway, they did it anyway. It took them 2 goes, but they did it anyway. And usually what happens is that MP will quit. I'm the first MP in Victoria not to quit the party when they've been expelled. And so there wasn't even a category for me. I had to keep going back to the Electoral Commission and the Parliament, and nobody really knew what I was, but I had a read of it, and it's unavoidable that I'm a fully fledged Liberal MP still. So I'm not an independent. I'm a Liberal MP.
Oh, and that's what it says on Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's right. But I call myself an independent Liberal now, because basically they've, I'm an outcast on the crossbench. I'm excluded from everything. But I'm under the same banner, basically. I'm just sort of cut out like a bullied kid at school. And last year I tried really hard to find a way for the leadership to retract that and save face, but none of my offers were taken. And so it was unacceptable to me that should stay over my name and impact my children and my husband and myself. So I'm having to actually sue two of the leadership team so far in court. So that starts this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just going to go back and be the very best MP that I can be.
You sound very tough. Good for you. That's what I think. Good for you. So you said you were hurt. You were hurt. How were you hurt during the scuffle outside?
Yeah, well, the very moment that these masked men, I had seen that they had come in, but they had no Nazi insignia. I didn't, and they had a really awful sign. It was a nasty sign, but it actually wasn't about Nazism. It was about I can't remember. It said something like pedo freaks or something. They weren't with us. They were nowhere near us. They didn't come and stand with us. They didn't listen to our speeches. I took a photo of every single one of our signs. I've got a record of everything.
Mm-hmm.
They were not with us. They weren't in our group. And we would have asked them to put that away. But a couple of people had, pretended to be with us, and they grabbed the microphone at literally the exact moment where the other group did their Nazi salute. It's pretty ironic. I was trying to hold the microphone from falling onto the girl who'd stolen it, because she would have been hurt because she was all tangled up in it. And while I was trying to stop that microphone stand from falling on her, she just kept kicking me in the shins. Like, I had bruises up and down my shins, and it was a bit weird. It was like, I sort of went into teacher mode,
Right.
like, you're having a tantrum. I'm just gonna hold this. I don't know. It was a bit strange, but I went into teacher mode and just tried to stop her from hurting herself more and other people more. We had 2 security guards. That's all we could afford. And then they obviously moved her on. But, it could have been worse. It could have been worse.
They were on the steps, right? They were on the steps of the legislature. So they're on the legislature property, right?
Yes, yeah. And they were right up the other end. So they were like 15 meters away from us the whole time. Mm-hmm. And we had our backs to them the whole time. And there were 6 groups there that day. And it was just ridiculous for anyone to associate that group with ours.
Mm-hmm.
There's live stream footage which has now come out. The Nazi group themselves have come out repeatedly and condemned me and Kelly J. Keane. I think something for like including lesbians, defending lesbians and defending women. I'm not sure,
So what were you talking about that day? What was your platform that you were?
So it's just that erasure of child safeguards and biological sex-based safeguards, Mm-hmm. So if a man, this came to my attention as a teacher, what really, really broke me down and dragged me out of my life was reading that they had changed the policies to make it so that anyone who identified as a female was to be treated as such. And that meant that male teachers were going to be allowed to come into my female students' change rooms on swimming carnival day and demand to supervise them. And I just thought, none of my girls are going to want that to happen. They're going to look at me and say, Miss, please don't let him in here. Mm-hmm. And
how old were your girls?
I would absolutely say, or my high school kids, so they would have been, 13 to 18. Yeah. And I would have said, I'm not going to let him in here, don't worry. But the policy was that then I would be charged. I would lose my job. And I just couldn't believe that. We had all worked so hard. I thought we were all on the same page about child safeguarding. I just, like, who on earth put that in there? And how did they get away with it? That's absolutely the opposite of child safeguarding. Mm-hmm. And, of course,
we've got... Very good question.
Yeah, we've got teenage boys coming in and out of the change rooms and toilets, terrorising them. Of course, that was always going to happen, and males. And when the kids go away on camps, because it's considered a medical condition, I found out that we weren't allowed to tell the parents who was booked in their room if it was a different gender. I mean,
yeah,
they wouldn't, I would absolutely have sued the school and the government had my children been subjected to that. And I really hope some parents get together and do that if it happens to their children. But they've really wrapped up all the laws in my state so that if you try to protest, it's, vilification. If you try to save your child from these horrendous, baseless, Frankensteinish, surgeries and hormonal interventions on children, then you are some kind of a bigot. And they call that conversion therapy. And I've pointed out time and again, no, you're the ones who are using toxic chemicals and surgeries to try and change something that you can't change in a person. Mm-hmm. That's just conversion therapy 2.0. We're the ones trying to save children from that. Um, so, there was lots of abuse on that kind of an issue, but it's one of those issues that's been really fantastic in uniting everyone, no matter which political spectrum they lean towards, left, right, all women, all mothers, all fathers, and all good men. They understand why we have these boundaries. They might not understand the fear that we have, but they don't try and push past those boundaries. There's only certain types of men that don't care and feel
Yeah.
entitled to push past women's and children's safeguarding boundaries.
Yeah,
And
and
those are not good
those type
men.
of men, how would you describe those type of men? Do you have a description of them? A
Suspect,
psychological description of
suspect
them?
at best.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that I know why, but it's not compassionate and it's not nice and it's not fair.
Well,
And
you
if they,
wouldn't be somebody who was caring and compassionate. No, you wouldn't have somebody who
that's
um,
right.
was there to take care of other people and mind those other people. These would be parasitical people who
It's
are
it's
feeding
it's
off of other people.
and they give this justification that if, from the men's perspective, if the men were forced to go back into the male change room, that they would be assaulted or beaten up. And I think, well, we actually understand the fear of being assaulted and beaten up from looking like women and being women. We understand that. But what you're demanding, the laws you're demanding, are actually ruining your ability to have a space away from other men anyway. The law you're asking for lets men into our spaces, and then that becomes the same equivalent of dangerous to you that you just complained about in your male toilets. You just made all the toilets able to have males come into them. So I don't believe you that you want, that you think that's a real say, that you're actually as afraid as we are. And if you wanted that, you should have asked for a third option. You should not have asked to absolutely eradicate all the safeguarding boundaries for women and children. And
Yeah. I
as much
worked in a
that's
swimming
right.
pool when I was young. And if somebody had been, say, shy at that point, because that would have, I guess, been the reason,
Hmm.
um, there would have been a place where the staff went that they could have changed in if they wanted to have somewhere that was away from everyone else. But having them go into a woman's change room, that's not asking for privacy, right?
No,
That's
that's
not
asking
privacy.
to, that's asking to invade other people's privacy.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I've
Yeah,
never been back to a
Phoenix, yeah.
public pool since they changed that, and I've got 4 children. When they
Hmm.
first brought it in, I just had all these nightmares, and I thought, what am I going to do? What am I actually going to do now if a man comes into the change room when I'm there with my daughters trying to get them changed and myself changed, and he's either taking off his clothes or just allowed to sit there and be there while we try to get in and out of our clothes? Because I thought, I'm not going to be allowed to call the police anymore. They've taken away my ability to call the police. The only moment where I could ask for help is when he puts his hands on us.
Hmm. Right, and
Even him
that's
being
not
even him being naked wouldn't be
right.
indecent exposure like it used to be. I said, if a man gets naked outside in a bush, I can call the police. But now he can just waltz right into my change room and just get naked there instead and do what he wants and identify and say that he identifies as a female. This is a terrible law.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, it's a
So
terrible law. Who were the
yes,
Nazis who did you find out who the Nazis were, or the people who were supposed to be Nazis, or at least making a Nazi
yeah.
symbol?
Well, I think they actually are, sadly.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So on the day, I made sure that I said the horrible Nazi salute just in case they were just a bunch of idiot young people. You just get these just idiots who do things that they think are funny, and it's not funny.
I see.
Um,
Because you saw them horsing around beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, apparently they were sort of fighting with one of the other groups. I didn't see a lot of it, but I just was very confused. And because I had this Holocaust survivor for an uncle, like you do not call people
No,
Nazis unless you're
no.
100% sure. So like I just had this constraint in me that you be sure first, Moira, you be sure. So I described their behaviour and condemned that. But later on, it turned out that yeah, there is a bit of a growing Nazi problem in Victoria, which is
Mm.
pretty shocking. I had
Why do
never
you think that
seen.
is? Why do you think it's growing again? Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about it more and more since that day because, people call each other, you're a Nazi this, you're a Nazi that, and it's not very serious, that accusation. But because there were real Nazis there on the steps that day, for me and all those women to be called Nazis and put next to photos with those men, like that is a serious, real accusation, and they are, as it turns out, Nazis. Although they can, obviously they condemned us. They're these young men, and I've since watched I don't know, maybe half an hour's worth of their videos, and it's just this angry young men who I was trying to understand if they had like an exact similar race theory as Hitler. Like, is it anti-Jewish or is it just anti-people who aren't white? And they sort of say like white culture or something like that. They're really, really angry men. They're disenfranchised. They were young. I was pretty shocked that they were young. And I thought, these are the kind of men that are going to attract my male students that don't have a father figure, that want someone to say, you're a strong man, this is how you be a man, we'll teach you, we'll take you under our wings, where, you can just see that that's a really dangerous combination, that there's lots of fatherless children out there, and then there's groups like this that would come along and give them very easy, simple purpose. It's sort of like socialism and communism. The bad people are out here. It's not inside you. There's nothing, you don't have to do any, humble reflection. This very, very easy philosophy where you don't have to do much self-reflection and you're not responsible. You're being oppressed. I mean, honestly, how are these boys being oppressed? And having said that, so that's very disappointing. But I have to say, one of the other thing that was going around in my head was something that impacted me at university very, very strongly, and that was an ex-Ku Klux Klan member who apparently travelled all around the world came to speak when I was at university. And he said, that he was very proud that he had, I don't know, however many Ku Klux Klan uniforms in his cupboard, because they were all from members that he had converted to give up Nazism and to come away from the Ku Klux Klan. And he just, almost out of penance, or he was just so ashamed of what he had done, and he thought, I can just go off and commit suicide or whatever, or I can try and do something good with what I know. And so he goes around giving these speeches, and he just tries to pull people out of the Ku Klux Klan and away from racism. And that really struck me, because especially as a teacher, I was thinking, how do these people go from being my lovely little students? Like, how did those young men go? They were only sort of 30 or something. So, I started teaching about 15 years earlier. I could have had boys like that in my classroom. And how did they go from that to that? Because I never saw anything like that in my classrooms. I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't just come out and admit it. But it's just upsetting to me, because what are we going to do with people like that? We can't sort of throw them in jail because they've got ideas that we don't like. The best thing we could do is win them back and have them become like that man who goes around and goes to the same communities that he was part of that were hateful, and tries to change things. And part of it, I think there's a real anti-male in our curriculum and in our culture, which I just think really feeds their I do get it that legitimately boys are told that they're inherently bad in some ways, and they're angry about it. And they've got every right to be angry about it, because, everybody is, really. What a ridiculous thing to say. And that doesn't give them any hope. You condemn them and you don't give them any hope. You don't give them any agency. You don't say, this is bad male behavior, this is good male behavior. Let's show you all the male heroes. Let's go through all the male heroes in history. None of them were perfect, but let's take you through. Let's give you good examples. And they just get told that there's this, it's almost like unconscious bias, You can never fix it. You can't say it's not there because it's unconscious, but other people can accuse you of having it. It's such a ridiculous thing to accuse someone of. And I'm like, well, if I don't know it's there, you certainly don't know it's there. It's inside my head, apparently, as if you would have more of an insight.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, there's lots of anger in my male students, and that's legitimate. And I think part of it comes from that. And then there's the identity politics, kind of like critical race theory in the United States. We've got it's I don't know that they really have a name for it here, but
Mm-hmm.
the same kind of thing is going on where there's this perpetual you basically, if you are a person of color, if you are an Aboriginal, or if you are an immigrant child, but often their families don't let them do this, but if you happen to want to indulge this in school or in society or whatever, you get places held for you with jobs, you get increases on your school grades, you get away with behavior that you shouldn't get away with, not because of any other reason other than that it is bad for your character development. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, doesn't matter if you've been bullied. If you happen to then bully someone, it is still horrible for me as a teacher not to punish you for bullying. So, and I did have that situation once. I had a kid that was really heinously bullying, girls actually. I came back from having a knee reconstruction, and I really, got along with the kids, and I found out what this kid had done, and he was like skulking away from me. And I was like, what's going on with him? And he had three times when I was gone, pulled down the pants of a girl, a high school girl. So she was developed, three times to the skin.
Wow.
And I was like, who is running this school? You are so lucky that wasn't my daughter. And later on I thought, if it had been the school captain that he did that to, something would have been done. But this girl was very poor. I think that they looked at her like she was a flirt, so whatever. I don't know. None of those things mattered to me. I was furious. And I spoke to the girl and I said, you have every right to go to the police. If that happens again, you call the police. I'll call the police. Don't you ever let them get away with this again. This can never happen again. If I had been here, I would have expelled him the second time he did it. Forever. The first time I would have suspended him and told him. The next time I called the police. And I would have, because he was not a 10-year-old. He was a 15-year-old. And when I spoke to the other teachers about it, saying, why was he not punished? What happened? They said, oh, Moira, you don't understand. He's adopted and he used to be really bullied as a child. And I was thinking, I don't care. You have just taught him that it's okay to assault girls. You've just showed the whole school that it's okay to do that to a certain type of girl. Because everyone would have known, like me, that if he had done that to the school captain, the girl, there would have been outrage. So look.
Yeah. It was strategic planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, fatherless families. We have fatherless families, in much of the world now.
Yeah.
And well, the feminist movement has a lot to answer for, don't you think?
Yeah, I've got a complicated relationship with this because I was raised by, I think, the feminists that were more reasonable about equal rights. And I think there's this new strain of feminism which is incoherent. There was an equal rights one which was more coherent, whether you agree with it or not. It was sort of internally coherent for the most part. And I had a mum, big career woman, but to have that career, she left me with her sister, who was a teacher, and she prioritised, staying home and being with your children when they're little. She used to say that to me all the time. She said, Moira, it's only a few years of your life. All up, it's probably 10 years that you miss having your kids and being there for the first 5 years of their life. It's not a big deal. People can get their careers back on track after that. Yeah. And, so I've got 4 children. I just worked part-time the whole time. It was actually my husband that was pushing me to get involved in politics. I was very reluctant because I love being a teacher and I love being home with my kids. I was one of these women who was surprised, having been absorbed the impression that being a mother was something that was like a burden. It's something that is an unfortunate and unfair thing that women have to do and be. And when I became a mother, when I saw my baby and when I started, being a mother, I just thought none of that was true. And I had the first year at home with my baby, and it was the best year of my life. And
Mhm.
I've just loved being a mother. I don't know why you would tell young girls that it's oppressive. I mean, of course, it could be if you've got a husband that's not very supportive, or it could be if you've got very difficult children. Um, and I don't think we're told that, parenting our children makes them easier for us to like and for other people to like them. Um, so I think there's this parenting style that is not helping us enjoy being a parent. And I can tell you as a teacher, it's not helping anyone else enjoy your children either. And
Right.
that's
Yeah.
not good for the kids.
Well, we've been told that to go to work. We've been told to go to work, and now we're telling our kid. Now they're saying that daycare is the right choice. Yeah, very young,
Yeah,
as young as 3, and sometimes younger than 3, and that gets in the way of the attachment, between the mother and the
exactly.
child.
I think I read a stat once that they broke it down to it. So it was every single year, but they had it in days and days as well. Basically, that a child spends away from its two parents. Like if it's with one, it's not counted. Um, Basically, the outcomes across that child's whole entire life in every single sphere are lower. So the more they're away from either their mother or father in the first, I think it was 7 years of their life,
Hmm.
the worse their long term life outcomes were. And I think you're right. I think it's partly that attachment theory, because I've got 4 children and I have been able to notice the difference. So, I was pressured to go back to work with my eldest.
Hmm.
Um, I, I only went part time and I only did it after a full year at home. And even
Hmm.
then I hated leaving.
Hmm.
Um, but she did have the thing that I saw in all my students eventually was this um, and a lack of confidence in who she was and where she belonged in the world. Not as much as some of the other kids. Compare that to my fourth child, who has never in her life basically had a day away from us. Partly because for 2 years we're all locked down in
Right.
Melbourne in the world's worst, harshest lockdown. Um, so she spent 2 years basically never seeing anyone else except our family. But oh my goodness, she's just so confident. It's hilarious. She's just not confused. When
Mm.
things happen, she's like, what's wrong with that person? Whereas other kids would think, oh, is there something wrong with me? And honestly, she's going to need to do some self-reflection, my youngest, of course. But, I did notice as a teacher that I would have these cohorts of children coming in, and actually what they wanted from me was
Mm.
um,
Mm.
maternal care. They would often call me mum by accident.
Mm.
These were high school kids. It
Right.
was like it
Right.
was sweet. It was sweet. And I did say to them, I said, look, legally, you know, I said, I work for your mother and your father. Legally, I'm your guardian, like your mother here. So I don't let my children get away with things. I won't be letting you get away with anything. And I hope that the people who teach my kids care about their character enough and their future not to train them to be narcissistic, because you're just never going to have any good relationships or have any chance of being happy if you are narcissistic in relationships. This might feel horrible to hear these kinds of things, but do you want to be soothed now and then fail in all your relationships as an adult, or do you just want to learn from someone who cares about you? So I really enjoyed that, and I loved teaching English, and I loved literature and all those kinds of things, and I loved chatting to the parents about their kids because they were the only other people that understood and really were as invested as I was in these. Obviously, far more invested, but invested like me in these kids' futures. Um,
And then you
I
took it
loved
to
that job.
politics. And why did you switch to politics?
I was just dragged out because I wanted these laws changed.
I
It was just non-negotiable.
see.
I have a history of pretty severe sexual abuse and assault from a multiple scenarios actually,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I just knew what I was looking at. And there was no one on this planet, nobody on this planet that was going to convince me that these were good policies. I
Mm-hmm.
knew what I was looking at.
And so what were the
Anyone,
policies that you were
the
keeping?
policies were that, that male teachers could identify as female and
Uh-huh.
supervise my girls.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think about it as a female teacher. Like sometimes I'd sleep in like sort of big tents with girls. Sometimes I'd be in there in the change rooms. I've had to help girls with all kinds of intimate things, and that's fine. And even then, I'm very careful. I'm very careful not to touch. I'm so careful for them, and
Mm-hmm.
also because I want them to always know that teachers should not be touching students, and teachers should not be speaking with students about certain topics in certain ways.
Right.
Um, like the closest I got. So I'll just give you an example. So sex education. So we used to talk about, basically pregnancy and contraception, um, STDs,
Right.
sexually transmitted diseases, consent. And then if it was a religious school, they'd say this is, whatever the design for marriage that is, that this school promotes or whatever. Never before had we gone into erotic sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, I am not a madam in a brothel. It is not my job to teach these kids how to give themselves or anybody else sexual pleasure. I did not sign up for that. And if you bring that in, again, coming from my own experience, I had a teacher sexually harass me and a bunch of other girls. He ended up going to jail
Mm-hmm.
eventually because he had sex with a couple of them, but he was such an obvious groomer. He was revolting. And he would say, I remember reading some of the curriculum and thinking, that is what this other teacher said to me. And now he will have legal cover to sexually harass my students in front of all the other students, and the parents can't do anything. Those girls can't do anything. The boys can't protect them, and they would have been upset for the girls. They would have been disgusted because a
Yes.
lot of them are really good, protective boys. And
Yes.
you can imagine them getting in trouble, Um, I just couldn't believe these policies. They were ridiculous. And they were right down to kinder. So one of the examples that I mean, it's a bit graphic, but the advice to teachers, even in kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
was if a child asks, what is a clitoris? Now, I would have said, what word is that? I wouldn't have even assumed that they had said that word.
Mm-hmm.
And before I went any further, I would like, who told you that word? Where
Mm-hmm.
did you hear that word? And I'd say, oh, it's just part of your whatever. It's part of your vagina. It's part of your private area. It's just part of it. And then I would just move on. And I
Yeah.
might tell mum or dad, someone has said this word to your child.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to check that out. And that would be it, really. But this said, you can answer the child, it is a little bump in between where the wee and poo comes out. And if you rub it, it feels good.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is a 4-year-old. There is only one word for people who want to say these things to 4-year-olds. We already have it. How is this in my Victorian government approved school curriculum? And I was outraged. And then I just thought, there's only one name, there's only one kind of person. So I wanted to know who did write it. I
Mm-hmm.
want to know the name. I want to know the names of these people. And so I started cataloguing all the curriculums. I started looking into, who was heading them up. One of them was a man named Gary Dowsett, who has been an advocate on the record, and I've still never heard him retract it. He calls it adult child sexual rights, so child sexual rights. Of course, he's talking about the idea that children can consent from Kenzie, which is garbage. It's called child rape. And but I just can't believe he was actually put in charge of our curriculum. And that's nowhere all over the news.
It's civic duty. Civic duty is something that used to be, everyone used to take part in
Yeah,
elections. My father just passed away. But he was 92, and in his time, he was on the hospital board. He was on the town council. He
yeah,
was, president of the Kinsman Club, and so so civic duty was something that businessmen really did,
yeah.
so that they could put themselves forward in service for
Yes,
for the community. But that's gone out of fashion. And so the
yes.
people now who are putting themselves in those positions aren't exactly who we want to be there.
No, and at the base level, I think about what kind of children are we raising anyway? We don't give them consequences for bad behaviour. We give them hot chocolates and, sympathy instead of saying, well, which is what I said to this boy. I said, actually, you've got less of an excuse than anybody else I've ever met to have done what you did to that girl.
Right.
You don't have anything. You have less of an excuse. I'm more disappointed in you because you know what it's like. That's why he was skulking away from me. He already knew what I was going to say to him. And this is my complicated relationship with feminism. So I had this image of very strong women. They were well educated. I do see now that men were sort of periphery. I do see now that their children, me included, we were unable to be really a part of that. We had to be given to other people to look after, and I didn't want to do that to my children. But when this transgender ideology came along, I grew up and I thought there is no such thing as sexism in this society. There is no such thing as the patriarchy. I don't see it. I can do whatever I want. I got a scholarship to university. Everyone was pushing me to go and do all these things that apparently women are not allowed to do, or they're crowded out of. I couldn't see that men were oppressing me anywhere. And then came the transgender laws, the self-ID laws. And then I just thought, if ever I would call anything the patriarchy, it is the transgender laws. Because why would a man's feelings and a man's desire to express himself sexually around children and in public trump my right to safety and dignity and privacy, or a child's right to safety and dignity and privacy, just on the basis of their feelings?
Yeah.
And I just thought, if that's the patriarchy, I did not believe in it before then, but I just can't believe everyone's gone along with it. Women's opinions and our safety and our dignity does not matter.
Yeah.
That's undeniable, or else these laws never would have gotten through.
Oh, yeah, you were talking about sex-based rights.
Yeah, so single-sex change rooms, the right to ask for a female prison guard to examine you if you are a prisoner, the right to ask for a female medical officer to examine you if you're a rape victim. We don't have any of those things in Victoria. These things are outrageous.
Now,
I've got a friend with a disabled sister who was raped because she wasn't entitled to have a female carer to wash her in the shower. Of course that was going to happen. So look, these things, I just cannot believe that we don't have these safeguards. And so I call them sex-based rights. Some people call them women's rights, but I try to say sex-based rights because it's men too. I know really good male teachers who have been really coerced, and they just refused to go and supervise, likewise, females in the change rooms. And they're just saying, you cannot make me go in there with a girl who's going to take off her clothes. You've got to be kidding me. I'm not doing it. I don't think that's good for her. I don't think that's good for her with the boys being in there. What is this? And they're being called names and things like that. It's bad for everybody. Then you've got the whole conflict, the internal incoherence between the TQ and the LGB, because same-sex attraction requires two sexes and it requires sex to be biological. They're attracted to your biological sex. They're not attracted to your gender identity. So it's actually literally thrown out the idea of homosexuality altogether. And we have multiple instances in Victoria of gay men and lesbians being discriminated against by organisations that were originally set up to serve them. It's just so incredible. And they've been denied access to service. One of them is a man who's been living with HIV, and he approached them for counselling and service. And because he had come out publicly and said to them, I don't agree with you promoting drag queen story time, and I certainly don't agree with you promoting these policies where lesbians aren't allowed to say no to men who identify as women, and I'm not allowed to say no to women who identify as men. And he was denied service, and his legs are covered in abscesses because he couldn't get help from this service that was set up originally to be an LGBT organisation. Lesbians weren't allowed to hold their own lesbian event without men who identified as women. That went all the way to the commission and came back. And so this is just a particular ideology that eradicates absolutely everybody's rights. It eradicates your free speech. So you got the coerced speech, like with Jordan. Seeing him stand there and handle that that famous video where he was inside that crowd and he handled it just very calmly. You know, everyone around the whole world was so encouraged by that. It's like watching Posey Parker. You know, everyone around the whole world has been encouraged by her strength, you know, and her absolute unashamedness, I think, and same with Jordan, because it is wrong. We know that it's wrong. We know that that is unfair and that is coercion. And what's really important for people to see is that you can stand up against it and you can survive. And so I think that's been really good. And that's what I want to show my children, you know, having been smeared, and I'm not going to let, you know, my family name be smeared with Nazism. I'm not letting that happen to my children. I don't care what else happens. That will not stand. And I've always taught my students and my children to stand up against injustice, obviously to do it with dignity and not to, you know, not out of just, you know, incoherent rage, but with dignity on the basis of what's right. And so I was never going to just let anybody do this to me or anybody else. And
So what gave you the courage and strength to stand up against it, do you think?
against this,
Well, also what you went through when you were young, you know, so you've been able to transcend that and to come forward and speak
yeah.
bravely. So
Um,
what did you have?
so I had a really good husband.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been married for almost 20 years now, 4
Congratulations.
children, and he's just been a very patient, very loving man. And I've also had really great counselling. So I've had counselling almost the whole time, even before we were married. And I had a really honest counsellor. He's a psychotherapist or something. And he, you know, I said to him, I'll be honest with you about when I'm struggling. You have to understand I have almost constant suicidal thoughts. I self-harm. I was a real mess.
Mm.
But I said, I won't do it. I won't commit suicide, but I will just want to because I'll be miserable. But I said, if you ever put me inside one of those involuntary care units, I said, I'll manipulate everyone. I'll get out of there and I'll commit suicide. Don't you ever put me in there because I didn't want to be raped again. I had gone to visit a friend in one of those once and she's drugged out of her brain. Out of her brain. I came out of there with like absolute terror of those places because, of course, young women who are drugged out of their brains are going to absolutely attract the kind of worker who raped my friend's little sister. And they're just, you know, friendship with women has been so beautiful. She's been an amazing friend. And my husband's been really good and patient. And so, you know, I had, we knew that I needed counselling because I was, you know, very damaged, very, very, very damaged. And things were exhausting. Things were harder to do than for other people. Everything took it out of me. And so, you know, we had this agreement with the psychologist that I would do what he asked and I would be honest with him, so long as he didn't ever, you know, involuntarily commit me to one of those institutions. And he said, that's fine. And I did all this hard work. So I went to him weekly for years and years and years. And can I just say that he didn't actually charge me. We have Medicare in Australia so that I didn't pay any out-of-pocket fees because we couldn't have afforded the amount of counselling that I needed. There was a program where the Victorian government would give you, I think it was 5 free sessions. Can you imagine? You've been raped.
Yeah.
And usually, I mean, I'm not unusual in terms of it's usually more than once. Often it's not just once. And they give you 5 free sessions.
Right.
And then you can continue seeing that person, you know, but it costs you. The woman that I was sent to was $180 per 45-minute session. I was a uni student. I wasn't going to be able to afford that.
No.
But this man just let me come back and see him basically for the next sort of 15 years.
Oh, my
And,
goodness.
you know, in different intensities. So often it was once a week and then it was once a fortnight. And then I had a sort of a year off. And during this last year, obviously it's been so catastrophic. You know, I've gone back to see him. My husband's also started seeing him now, which is really nice. It's been helpful for our family. So being proactive about pursuing healing and wholeness. And obviously it's traumatic. Getting counselling is traumatic. You go into this storm, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because you're going through all these painful memories. But I just pursued healing, I didn't want to have to stand up in front of my female students or any daughters that I was going to have. Sorry.
That's
and not be able to say, you can recover from rape. You don't have to let these people ruin your life. Because I remember hearing in high school, and I heard girls say it when I was a teacher, and I always pulled them up on it when I was a teacher, that I'd rather die than be raped. And they didn't know they were saying that to someone who'd been raped over and over, and how that was, it just made me feel like my life wasn't worth living. I'm not upset with them, but I just, whenever I heard that as a teacher, I always said, don't say that. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say that. You don't know who's listening, and if that happens to you, I guarantee you can come out stronger than before. You can rise from the ashes like a phoenix, Don't say that. We can recover and come back stronger from all kinds of things. It's wrong that would happen to you, but I needed to be able to heal in order to be able to say that. And so I sort of was, inside myself saying, come on, God, you said that you're the God of comfort and the God of healing. Let's, chop, chop.
I need you now.
Please deliver. Here I am. That's right. Yeah. And it hasn't really been easy to explain to people. And even my relationship with God's gone up and down. So for a while there, my favorite verse was, lean not on your own understanding, because it just didn't make sense. It didn't make any sense how he could be a good God and allow these things to happen. So I just wrestled with that. So basically I didn't ignore it. I didn't suppress it. I didn't try and avoid the pain. I did go on a very mild antidepressant for a while, but every time I was pregnant, I just came off it cold turkey. And I didn't want to be on antidepressants as a coping mechanism. I was really saying to sort of society and to God, like, you want me to have hope, you want me to heal, I'm here and I'm going to try. Prove it. You prove it to me that I can get better from this. And people came through. Counselling did help. My husband being steady and calm did help. He was that rock in the storm always. And having children is so remarkably healing, and it makes everything else seem, pale in comparison. The joy of being a mother, the minute I was a mother, I would have put up with anything to get to that moment and meet my child. And so doing the work and caring about my students and it was so important to me to be able to say to kids with a straight face that you can heal from this. Because, you read the stats on how many of these kids are assaulted, and it's pretty terrible. Even if they're exaggerated, I don't know. But I do know a lot of women that were even mildly assaulted. Like, all women know that there's so many predators out there. And one of the other things that really convicted me was, because, then I had a son. And I thought, I do not want my son to turn into one of these men. But if he did, what would I do? I'd have to, I would keep loving him, but, I'd have to send him to jail. I'd visit him in jail and love him and everything. But I just thought, how can we help boys not end up doing that without demonizing them, without vilifying them for having, a biological reaction to, stimuli that is attractive? How can we help these boys? And then if they do something, what are we going to do? A lot of them are minors. A lot of the assaults that we've got coming out are minor on minor assaults. And part of that, I'm convinced, is because they've introduced this sexualized curriculum to really young kids, which they then role play.
Right.
Getting them into porn. You just think this. We used to have a word for people that tried to introduce sex and sexuality and eroticism into children's lives. At best, idiots. Medium. Well, when there is no medium, then you're into grooming territory and predator territory. Oops, sorry. I don't understand it. But it was really important to me looking, at my son in my arms, my little baby boy, and all these nice boys that I had that were my students. And I was thinking, if I ever heard that any one of them had done that, I would be so surprised and sad, not just for the girl, but honestly for them, because what have you done to your life? And can a boy who's done something like that, can he recover like a girl can recover? Because that's ideal, is if they can recover and be sorry and be different. Like, that is the ideal. People don't want to talk about that, but as a victim, and a mother of a son, that is an issue that really, really plays on my heart all the time, because I care about these boys and I don't want them to make one of these mistakes, because they're drunk and they're into porn and they've desensitized their brains and they've made themselves into vaguely sociopathic idiots when it comes to females. That was the other thing. They would recommend porn to these kids as a sexual aid. And I'm like, have you told them that it turns you into a sociopath and that it actually stunts your sexual enjoyment? Because it's like a drug. Have you told them that it's addictive and they could actually humiliate themselves and ruin their lives? And none of that is in there.
No, of course not.
And again, I'm like, what kind of a person who purports to care about children and to wanting to guide them only puts in porn as a sexual aid? I mean, that was in a Year 9 resource that I got, I wrote an article about it which went viral. Just unbelievable things. So look, I was dragged out of my life. I didn't want to get into politics. I'm not interested in political power at all. But it's becoming a very authoritarian society. It's becoming not just authoritarian, but, the moral boundaries that are just being obliterated are even more disturbing to me, I think, because I'd read, I did international relations, I'd studied history. You look at political power, you look at, it always ends in murder, unhinged political authoritarianism. That doesn't end anywhere, as far as I can see in history, but like without going all the way to murder, which is bad enough. And then there's this total degradation of moral boundaries, which is, I don't think I've ever read about it being en masse like this.
No, this is extreme, isn't it? Although history is long, and what's written in the Bible is
nothing new under the sun.
There's some pretty unhinged things that happen through the Bible. Yeah. It looks like, well, we're going through a very major unhinged moment.
Yeah. Yep. And I just figured, well, all these movements, they always fall. But they only fall with the gradual joining of pushing against it. They have to be fought all the way to the ground. They have to be wrestled to the ground. And either I'm going to do my part or my children are going to have to do double. And no matter what time you were born into history, there's always something like this. And you can't romanticize it. It is as bad, as it looked,
So can you go to bed at night and feel like you're doing your part?
Yes, but it's sort of about, I'm a really practical person, and so until those laws are gone,
you still feel you have work to do for sure.
Yeah, I mean, until these types of laws are gone, we have to regain that liberal democratic principles-based justice and legal system that is propped up by a coherent and cogent and unified cultural civil society. And, someone from Africa, a husband of one of my friends, said, Moira, you can have multi-ethnicity, but you can't have multiculturalism. And I was like, what do you mean? I mean, that was 10 years ago. I've been thinking about it a lot. And I thought, I think what he was trying to say is you must have a critical mass of agreement on values. There's got to be a critical bare minimum of values that people from different cultures can agree on.
Yeah.
And, unless we ship everyone out who disagrees with whoever happens to be whatever the majority, or we go to civil war, our only other options are to have these ground rules where you get to have your freedoms, I get to have mine, and we agree to disagree. But, even then, if they don't, if there's not enough people that agree that even that should be a basis for building society.
Well, you can disagree, but what do you do when the basic values are different? That just sounds like conflict to me.
Yes, because even democracy, I mean, that's a particular value,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if
Mm-hmm.
there are people in a society that don't even believe in democracy, that don't even believe in freedom of religion or freedom to agree to disagree, what if there's a critical mass of people who don't even believe in any of that, and they think you should just submit to whatever they believe, if it's socialism, communism, or a particular religion? I mean, yes, there's going to be conflict. And, I look at Europe and all around the world, it looks very unstable, and it's getting to feel the same way in Australia. I think we, a lot of the time, feel that things are very distant. That's overseas. That's overseas. Australia is different. We've got it right.
Right.
But there have been really rapidly intensifying public marches, opposed to each other, that have gotten very violent. That must have been just under the surface. All these feelings, all these people worked together clearly somehow all these years, and now they're out on the streets saying things that I just never thought I would hear.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought I would hear these things out in public, these hateful things. And no one
This is
trusts
from
them.
the conflict in Gaza and
Yeah.
Israel.
And
Yeah.
so I've been working with the Muslims actually on sex-based rights and child
Mm.
safeguarding, because they're with me on that.
Yes, that's for sure. They're here. Same here.
Right?
It's awesome. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I put up a post on the day that the attack happened, and one of my Muslim friends sort of criticized me a bit, and I thought, oh, maybe Hamas is not that terrorist organization that I thought it was, and I thought, oh my goodness, I probably made an embarrassing mistake, and so I took it down quickly and started researching. I was thinking, no, it is that terrorist organization. It is. And then spent sort of 2-3 days really going through with this Muslim friend of mine, and just trying to explain to them, nobody in Australia is going to have a category to understand why you are cheering in the streets after we've all seen footage of this girl being dragged with broken legs back the wrong way. Could have been any of us or our daughters, by people who are not in a soldier's uniform, and she's not a soldier, and they were spitting on her and cheering. And I said, you can want us to understand the conflict from your perspective, but we just don't. That's not going to happen overnight. And I just said, really, can you at least condemn Hamas? Without, I'm not trying to get into whatever other issues are going on, but this doesn't look like a war. It looks like non-combatants. It looks like against civilians. We don't have a category. Nobody has a category where that's okay. But I don't know. This is going to, people are going to be, because at that stage I don't think I quite understood how strongly, the Muslim community feels about that, or what it looks like from their perspective. So they were telling me that, from the river to the sea doesn't mean that, it means something else. And they were saying this footage was not real and this footage is real. I mean, even I got to the point where I was like, I don't even feel like I can make a case for what has happened. And then I was criticised for, because I'd been defamed as, a Nazi sympathiser, if I tried to say something in favour of, looking after Jewish people, because there was this really massive rise in anti-Semitism. Obviously, I got called a Nazi myself, and I ended up just sort of staying a little bit quiet on it, because if I go anywhere near a Jewish issue, it becomes a circus show, and I don't want to do that to them either.
No.
But with the Muslims, I was just trying to explain. I was saying, people will not understand, and they will really worry about you, and you don't seem like the kind of people to worry about. I've met you. I've worked with you for a few years now. So our relationship is okay. And then I was watching all these, young white Greens people come out, the leftist parties coming out in favour of that. That was very confusing. And they were going on about white colonialism, and they sounded really anti-Semitic. People were saying horrendous things. People who called me a Nazi were saying the most unbelievably heinous things, and I couldn't even get my head around criticising them, because I was like, why can't they hear themselves? What is happening here? And I had to really read what they were saying and find out that they consider the Jewish people, white, and not, because I was like, but aren't they all from the same area? I would consider that, I would lump them in with sort of, Middle Eastern, lovely, beautiful, brown-skinned people, Why are they being called white? Why are they being called Nazi? Like, why would you call a Jew a Nazi? That's, I was really having...
That's backwards.
I can't even argue with them because it's so confusing. But so basically they had this thing where all peoples who have been oppressed by white peoples, and those are the two groups.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's simple enough to understand if you're not thinking very deeply, right?
Yeah.
That way they can get everybody to go along with it, because it's just so it's only the surface. It's only a surface.
And the footage is confusing. The footage is graphic, and everyone's getting emotional. My husband said straight away, Moira, do not watch the footage that's coming out of Gaza.
Yeah,
don't watch it. And I didn't mean to watch that one with that girl. That's still the only thing that I've seen. And that ruined me. That ruined me for 3 days. I was like in tears. I was so upset. And that was just because it came up on my feed. And I thought, all these people who think they're on the right side are getting really emotional because they're seeing things that both sides believe happened, and now they're in the streets of Melbourne fighting.
Yeah, they're in the streets of Toronto, they're in the streets of New York, they're
all
in
over
the
the
streets
world,
of London, everywhere.
Yeah.
And how do they have the time to do that? Where's their responsibilities? Where are their children? Where's their workplaces? Like, how do they have all that time to go march, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the schools around here, a teacher encouraged the kids to go. That's the other thing I hate that teachers do. I love my fellow teachers, but, sometimes I see things like this and I think, here I was trying all the time to make sure the kids did not know if I was voting for one party or the other. I would often test how I was going and say, who do you think I vote for? And they never knew until I ran, which was, that was how I measured myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was finding out teachers were deliberately, unabashedly indoctrinating them into their own political views, which is a disgrace. And that's one piece of legislation that I would absolutely change. It's not a normal workplace being a teacher, and you do not get to usurp parental rights. You do not get to indoctrinate other people's children against their parents' will. So that was really disappointing. Yeah, so the whole world's very unstable, I think, at the moment. But in my little world, the healing's come through a stable marriage, becoming a mother, having time to be a mother, staying home with my children, enjoying being a mother, enjoying only working part-time, things like that. Coming into Parliament has been obviously really hard. It was the worst year ever for our family last year, not only because we were defamed, obviously mostly because of that, but because I had never really worked full-time and I had never been away from the kids so much.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even because of all the...
How old are your kids now?
So I've got 15-year-old daughter, 11-year-old son, 7-year-old daughter, 5-year-old daughter.
I see. Yeah, so they're all in school now. Huh?
School age, yeah. Well, we homeschool them, actually.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, yes, that's becoming the best option, I think.
Yeah, and as a teacher, it's been interesting to see that it's so effective. It's unbelievably effective. It doesn't take as much time.
How much time does it take?
Once they can read, so before that it's sort of like 15 minutes a day, maybe a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a couple of hours a day, and then you give them a list of things to do and you don't let them get on screens, and they listen to audiobooks and they build Lego. If they say they want to do something, you try and get them what they need. If a curriculum's not working, you can change it. So when I was a teacher, I always wanted to help my students do the best they could, and so I would do all this research and find, which country's doing the best, getting the best results in English or maths or whatever. And I would find the benchmarks and I would basically wheedle my way through and ask for free copies of curriculums or whatever. But I was always astounded that basically they came to me in high school illiterate. And I just thought that was such a travesty, and it was not fair on those kids, because they'd say, oh, I'm dumb, miss. I'll let you know if you're dumb.
Right.
What you are is you are undereducated. That's a different thing. And really, you're already in year 7. No one is going to fix this for you. It's not fair that this happened. You need to build a bridge and get over it. And I can show you some websites where you can go and practice, but I don't have time in this class to teach you. You're not stupid. You can learn this, but no one's going to do it for you. And I don't want you coming in here and whinging. You know, something has gone wrong and it's not your fault, but still you're going to have to be the one to fix it, you know?
That's a good message.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed helping them do better, and I just couldn't understand why it was so ineffective. But now I do, you know. It's because what they do is they just keep rolling kids over at a low standard. If they go up a year level in age, then they go up a year level at school.
Yeah.
Whereas in homeschooling, it's mastery or nothing. It's like there is no, it doesn't matter what age you are, you're just working at the level that you're working at. So in some subjects, my kids are just like miles ahead, and a couple of them, they're sort of at standard.
And so what do they do for socialization? People always worry about, oh, we have to send our kids to school for socialization. So
as a teacher, may I just encourage everybody to stop thinking of schools as some paradise of education. And if they've ever read Lord of the Flies, think of it more along those lines. Not in my classroom, obviously. My classroom was well run. But
there it was.
I've realised now that's why they liked me, because I was in charge, and there wasn't going to be some overbearing child running it who was not going to be fair. So they needed me to be in charge. They needed that, and they were happy that I was, you know, strict and fair, but not mean. So basically, for socialization, all my kids do jiu-jitsu, they do soccer, my daughter does singing. So basically I make sure that they have some other activity with kids who aren't homeschooled. I make sure that they've got that. But also homeschooling is so massive now. We could go to a different group every single day and meet 30 different kids every single day.
Right.
And because they have each other, like I would feel sorry for a kid that was homeschooled that didn't go out much, that was just a single child. But some kids are suited to that again, you know. Some kids that wouldn't be an issue.
No.
You know, you deal with it. Yeah, you just deal with the different personalities of your child. And so then they have their own they're a little tribe. It's pretty cute, you know. And I noticed in homeschooling groups, the other thing that I noticed that was really different is that the big ones really start acting like older brothers and sisters to all the little kids, whereas at school, even though they were lovely kids, same kind of lovely kids as the homeschool kids, they just felt like they weren't allowed to help or go near kids of a different age group. They all stayed in their age groups, and they didn't understand the joy and fun of having mixed age groups, and they didn't get that opportunity to be important to someone, to a little person. You know how that's really lovely for people sometimes, you know? And so I noticed that a lot. And I thought,
it's wonderful to watch.
Isn't it? Yeah. So my eldest and my youngest are exactly 10 years apart, like exactly. And she just loves it. And so does my youngest, you know. She's basically got two mums, you know, two mummies. She's got Eva Rose, my eldest, and I think about how much that's going to help her when she is a mother and a wife. Because I said, you know, what you're going to have is you're going to have no rosy-coloured glasses about how children are little need machines, they're ungrateful, you know, but then they give you delicious cuddles and they're gorgeous and they're funny and, you know, and that it's worth it. And you're not going to have, you're already going to know, you're going to know how to change nappies, how to look after kids, how to keep you cool. I don't know. It's just going to be so great. I had no experience when I became a mother. It's very funny.
No, neither did I.
Yeah. I didn't know.
My husband he was the eldest in his family and I was the youngest. So I didn't have any little sisters or brothers, but he had a sister and a brother that were younger and good parents. And so that was good. It was good training for me to get married to him.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband is the eldest and I'm the youngest as well.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. So that works out pretty well. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So look, it's been fun. It's been different to what I thought my life would be. You know?
No, me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't get to, well, if you know that so I've learned that I'm not the master of my destiny. I used to think I was. That never, I mean, it went all right, but it was never, it had problems, you know, but now I'm on an adventure because I take my cues from my prayer and what I see is the next right thing to do. And I go that way without questioning. And that gets me into places that I had no idea I would end up.
That's so funny you use that phrasing people asked me, why didn't I just condemn those innocent women when I was told to? And they blame me for wrecking my own career because I wouldn't do that thing. Um, but it was exactly that feeling. I was like, I do not know what's going to happen to me, and I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know undeniably that this is this is one thing that is wrong, and I can't do that one thing. And I don't know what the consequences will be. I know I can clearly see they're going to be bad, but I didn't do this to myself. That this is being done to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to. I'm not going to do. I'm not going to join in with them to do what they've done to these other women. Um, yeah, and defending myself against it has been this most outrageous, offensive thing to so many people in my party. Like, how did they blame me for this whole catastrophe? Even though they do say, "Well, he shouldn't have done what he did," but you just should have stayed quiet about it. And
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
just
This
think,
staying quiet's working out real well for everyone, isn't it?
yeah,
You
but
know,
they
look what
wouldn't,
we've got ourselves into now,
they wouldn't accept it if it had happened to them.
right?
You know, I'm
and,
like, are you
and maybe they
serious?
would have. Maybe
I'm
they
not an
would have.
idiot. You would want me to defend you if it happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no,
Mm-hmm.
my family's not wearing it for for these people's mistakes. Absolutely not. Yeah, so yeah, I'm not the master of what happens to me. Absolutely not. I've got a court
Yeah.
case next year, and I've got 3 years left in this position. I'm just going to fight all the way through to get back in that party room, because it's not about
Mm-hmm.
me. It's about changing these laws, and you can't do that from the crossbench. You can't govern from the crossbench. We do need a critical mass in all of our cultures to unite over some really fundamental values and put
Yes.
them back into the law.
Yes.
It's everything's
Mm-hmm.
just getting so extreme and out of whack.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we've just got to keep helping, even if it costs us.
Well, next time I come to Australia, we'll have to meet up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hmm. I don't think we're going to travel through the States this winter. We'll be going next winter, we'll be going to Europe and Southeast Asia. And so that will probably also be Australia, because why wouldn't you once you're down there?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that'll
Hmm.
be fun.
Yes,
You
that'd
know,
be fun.
there's lots and lots of huge fans for you guys out here. Yeah,
Well, it'd be good to introduce Jordan to you and your friends.
yeah, that'll be great.
So we'll definitely do that. So stay in touch.
Yeah, I will. Thank you so much for interviewing me. It was lovely to meet you.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing your story with us and giving people a perspective on how to navigate through all this mess.
I'm still learning as I go, but yes.
We're all learning as we
Yeah.
go. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks,
Very
Tammy.
nice. Thank you.